Mars looks dead from the outside, a cold, rust-colored desert. No oceans, no forests, no signs of anything alive, just craters and dust and silence stretching as far as any camera has ever seen. But scientists are not looking at the outside anymore. They are looking underneath, and what they are finding below the Martian surface, layer by layer, discovery by discovery, is making the most experienced planetary scientists stop mid-sentence and say, "We did not expect this." 7 things buried under Mars, all of them real, all confirmed by NASA missions, peer-reviewed science, and data coming back right now from rovers and orbiters still operating on and around the red planet today. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next on this channel. Now let's go underground. Number 1, a buried ocean the size of the Arctic. Start with the biggest one, because this one alone rewrites how we think about Mars. Scientists have known for decades that Mars once had surface water. The valleys, the ancient riverbeds, the lake sediments in Jezero crater. All of it tells a story of a wetter world billions of years ago. But where did all that water go when the climate changed? The answer that has been building from research published across 2024 and into 2026 is underground. Most of it went underground. A study published in 2024 estimated that Mars holds enough water trapped in its crust to flood the entire planet to a depth of nearly 2 kilometers if it were brought back to the surface. Researchers found evidence of a buried ocean that could harbor liquid water beneath the Martian surface. The water is not in a single reservoir. It is distributed throughout the porous rock of Mars's deep crust, absorbed, frozen, or potentially still liquid in places where geothermal heat from the interior keeps temperatures above freezing. The scale is what stops scientists cold. We are not talking about a few pockets of subsurface moisture. We are talking about enough water to have once formed a global ocean that covered the northern hemisphere of Mars. Scientists believe they found fresh proof of an ancient ocean on Mars in the form of a bathtub ring it left after it dried up billions of years ago. A continental shelf feature identified in CNN's April 2026 reporting matches what you would expect to see if an enormous body of water had once stood at a specific level for long enough to carve that feature into the landscape. Mars did not lose its water. It hid it, underground, where it has been sitting for billions of years. Number 2, underground water that soaked ancient sand dunes and may have preserved signs of life. This is where it gets more personal, because this discovery is not just about water in the abstract. It is about what that water was doing. Ancient sand dunes in Gale Crater appear to have been soaked by underground water billions of years ago, leaving behind minerals that can preserve signs of life. Even after surface water disappeared, subsurface flows may have created protected environments. This research, published in March 2026 by a team at New York University, analyzed data from NASA's Curiosity rover, which has been exploring Gale Crater for over a decade, and found chemical signatures in the ancient dune sediments that could only have formed if groundwater had flowed through them long after the surface dried up. The word that stands out in the research is protected. Underground environments protected from the harsh radiation that bombards Mars's surface. Protected from the oxidizing chemistry of the thin Martian atmosphere. Protected pockets where, if microbial life had existed on Mars, it could have survived long after the surface became hostile. Scientists are not saying life is there. They are saying the conditions that could preserve evidence of life, or life itself, existed underground on Mars for far longer than the surface would suggest. And some of those conditions may persist today. Number 3, pure sulfur crystals sitting where they have no business being. In 2024, NASA's Curiosity rover was driving across Mars and accidentally ran over a rock. The rock cracked open, and what was inside it stopped the science team cold. Pure yellow sulfur crystals, a field of them, more concentrated and pure than anything previously found on Mars. Finding a field of stones made of pure sulfur is like discovering an oasis in the desert. It shouldn't be there, which means we now have to explain it. That was the direct reaction from Curiosity's project scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Here is why pure sulfur is so strange. Sulfate minerals, sulfur combined with other elements, form when sulfur mixes with minerals in the presence of water and then dries out. Those are common on Mars. Scientists expected them. Pure elemental sulfur is different. On Earth, pure sulfur forms in very specific conditions, near hydrothermal vents, volcanic fumaroles, and hot springs. It requires geological processes involving heat, specific chemistry, and very particular conditions to deposit pure sulfur, rather than sulfur compounds. None of those processes were thought to be active in the region of Mars where Curiosity found this deposit. So either the geological history of that region is more complex and more geothermally active than anyone mapped, meaning there is buried heat down there that previous models missed, or the sulfur traveled from somewhere else, carried by fluids or gases from a region where those conditions did exist. Either explanation means something interesting is buried beneath that part of Mars. Something that was generating enough heat or chemical activity to produce pure elemental sulfur. And we still do not know what it was or where exactly it came from. Number 4, a brand new mineral that should not exist and hints at buried geothermal heat. This one is fresh. Published in Nature Communications in March 2026, scientists studying orbital data from Mars identified what may be a completely new mineral, ferric hydroxysulfate, buried in ancient sulfate deposits in the Valles Marineris Canyon system. Ferric hydroxysulfate is much rarer and occurs only in a few small locations. Scientists suspect that warmer geothermal sources once existed beneath these areas, producing the conditions needed to create this mineral. Additional deposits could remain buried under layers of monohydrated sulfates. Here is what makes this significant. The researchers at the SETI Institute and NASA Ames performed laboratory experiments to figure out how this mineral forms. The process requires starting with hydrated iron sulfates, heating them in the presence of oxygen, and allowing them to transform through a specific chemical sequence that only works within a narrow temperature range. That temperature range requires a heat source, a geothermal heat source, something warm buried underneath, generating enough heat to drive this chemistry. Mars is often described as a geologically dead planet, its volcanic activity mostly finished, its interior cooling, its heat mostly dissipated. But this mineral, sitting in deposits on the Martian surface, is telling us there were localized pockets of geothermal warmth beneath specific regions. And the researchers noted that additional deposits could still be buried beneath the overlying rock layers, invisible from orbit, waiting for a rover to reach them. Buried geothermal heat. Not uniform, not global. Patchy. Localized. And in those localized warm zones, relevant for the same reason the underground water is relevant. Number 5. Complex organic molecules, the building blocks of life, buried in the rock. NASA's Curiosity rover has been drilling into Martian rock for over a decade and analyzing what comes out. What its sample analysis at Mars instrument has found is a growing and increasingly complex library of organic molecules. Mars machinery has detected more than 20 organic molecules from clay-bearing sandstones in Gale Crater. Diverse organic molecules were found in Mars, and the ongoing characterization of organic matter on Mars is a pillar of modern robotic exploration. These are not simple carbon compounds. They include cyclic organic molecules, ring-shaped structures that on Earth are often associated with the chemistry of life. Macromolecular carbon, large, complex organic structures that on Earth form as byproducts of biological activity, though they can also form through non-biological chemistry. We now have evidence for diverse and potentially complex organic matter, preserved in different locations on Mars, and detected with different instrument suites. This suggests that organic carbon is better preserved over long time periods on Mars than we expected, given the harsh radiation environment. That last sentence matters. Mars's surface is bombarded by radiation from space, ultraviolet light and cosmic rays that would destroy organic molecules exposed at the surface. The fact that complex organics are being found preserved in the subsurface rock tells scientists that Mars's geology has been protecting these molecules for billions of years, shielded by layers of rock from the radiation that would otherwise have broken them apart. Organic molecules are not life. Finding them does not mean life existed or exists on Mars. But they are the ingredients, they are the raw materials. and their preservation underground is exactly what you would need if you were also trying to preserve biological chemistry across billions of years. Number 6. A buried glacier near a volcano, in a location that is a prime target for life. In 2024, researchers analyzed data from orbital spacecraft and found what appears to be the remains of a buried glacier at the base of one of Mars's ancient volcanoes. The ice is not exposed at the surface. It is covered by rock and dust that has accumulated over it over millions of years, essentially a fossilized glacier, preserved underground. Researchers spotted what appears to be the remains of a sheet of buried glacier ice near the base of the volcano, which could make the volcano a prime location for astrobiological research. The combination of the two things, a buried glacier and a volcano, is what makes this discovery stand out. Volcanoes generate heat. Ice near a heat source melts. Liquid water near a heat source in the dark, protected from radiation, with minerals from volcanic rock to provide chemical energy. That is a habitat. On Earth, those conditions in deep underground environments support entire ecosystems of microbial life that never see sunlight. Scientists use the phrase prime location for astrobiological research deliberately. That is careful scientific language for, if there is life anywhere on Mars, places like this are where you would look first. Number 7. Potential biosignatures in a rock that stumped scientists for a year, and still does. This is the one that is the hardest to explain and the hardest to dismiss. In July 2024, NASA's Perseverance rover was driving through an ancient river channel in Jezero Crater when it encountered a rock the mission team nicknamed Chayava Falls. They drilled into it and extracted a sample they called Sapphire Canyon. Then they spent a year putting that sample through every analysis instrument available, both on the rover and in labs on Earth using spare instrument equipment, before publishing the results in Nature in September 2025. What they found were minerals and textures that on Earth are consistently associated with microbial life. Specifically, the Sapphire Canyon sample contains potential biosignatures, clues that suggest past life may have been present, but that require more data or further study before any conclusions about the absence or presence of life. The specific features that caught their attention were the leopard spots, irregular clusters of iron and phosphate minerals arranged in patterns that on Earth form when microbes alter the chemistry of their immediate surroundings. The halo structures around those spots. The organic compounds mixed in with ancient clay. This finding by Perseverance is the closest we have ever come to discovering life on Mars. The identification of a potential biosignature on the red planet is a groundbreaking discovery. But here is the honest part. The same team that published these findings made clear that some unknown non-biological chemistry could also explain the signals. The rock sat in an ancient riverbed. It had been soaked with water billions of years ago. It was buried under sediment that protected it. The conditions that could have produced those patterns biologically are the same conditions that could have produced them through certain purely chemical processes. The Sapphire Canyon rock is the most interesting thing ever collected on another planet, and the scientists who studied it for a year still cannot tell you definitively what made it look the way it does. That is not a failure. That is the honest frontier of science. The answer requires bringing that sample back to Earth, where instruments 1,000 times more powerful than anything a rover can carry can spend years analyzing exactly what happened inside that rock, which is exactly why the Mars Sample Return mission exists, and exactly why what is buried under Mars may be the most important scientific question of the next generation. 7 things buried under Mars. An ocean's worth of water in the crust. Ancient dune fields soaked by underground rivers that could have sheltered life. Pure sulfur crystals where none should be. A brand new mineral formed by buried geothermal heat. Complex organic molecules preserved in rock for billions of years. A buried glacier next to a volcano that scientists call a prime target for life. And a rock with patterns that look biological and have not been fully explained after a year of scrutiny. None of this is settled. None of it is finished. The data is still coming in. The samples are still waiting to be returned. The answers are still underground. But every single one of these discoveries points in the same direction. Mars is not the dead, frozen desert it looks like from the outside. Underneath the rust-colored surface, something complicated happened. Something is buried, and we are only beginning to understand what it is. If this video gave you something to think about, hit like, share it with someone who would find this as fascinating as you did, and subscribe. Because this story is not over, not even close. Stay curious.